Welcome to Pencil Leadership. I'm Chris Anderson, success and lifestyle entrepreneur, and I'm on a mission to help you realize your full potential so you can leave a positive mark on the world. So if you're ready, take out your pencils and let's begin. And if you want to make a difference in the lives of others, share this episode, go over to Apple Podcasts and follow us there to leave a positive rating and review. And together we can leave a bigger positive mark on the world. Your biggest crisis being your greatest gift. And so today we have Dr. Debi Silber on the show today. And so we're going to dive into that, just what that looks like, to how to go from your biggest crisis to your greatest gift with her today through her experience. So Debi, Dr. Silber, welcome to the Pencil Leadership Podcast today.
Yeah, it's Silber and Debbie's just fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. You know, you worked for that doctor, so I want to put it in there for sure. So,
Thank you.
So a lot of expertise coming just from everything you've done. Obviously, founder of the Post Betrayal Transformation Institute, among a host of other things that you've put out into the world that you're doing. #1 bestselling book, right? Unshakable Woman, the 4 steps to rebuilding your body, mind, and life after a life crisis. Just excited to dive into this. First, I guess if you'd like to just share with people who might not know you, how did you become doing what you're doing and leading into this biggest crisis to greatest gift topic?
Yeah, well, it's my 30th year in business. And as life would morph and change, so would business. So I started in health and then mindset and then personal development. And then I had a couple of my own traumas. And one was a really profound betrayal from my family. And I thought I did everything I needed to do to heal from that. And then a few years later, it happened again. This time it was my husband. So I got him out of the house and I looked at the two experiences thinking, okay, what's similar to these two? Of course, me, but what else? And I realized boundaries were always getting crossed. I never really took my needs seriously. And I just knew something big had to change. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, thriving business. I was 50 and I'm like, that's it. I'm going back for a Ph.D. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it, how I was going to manage at the time, but I just knew I had to learn my way out of this betrayal. And a book wasn't going to do it. I needed like a whole PhD on it. And it was in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential, because I was changing so much. I didn't quite understand what was happening. He was too on his own, wasn't ready to look at that. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive? And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my business, my family, my life.
Wow. So obviously we learn through our experiences, right? And like kind of what we're talking about, their biggest crises can be our greatest gifts. And that's what you found, it seems like, through that. So I guess, but I'm sure it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't probably easy. So the second trait of pencil leadership is that we all go through sharpening, things that hurt, that take part of this way, that, kind of shape us, but can be good in the end. So how did you start through that journey, just that transformation yourself to, overcome that betrayal, that hurt, to this healing part?
It was interesting because when I was looking at my study participants, I assumed, and you're not supposed to assume anything as a researcher, I was new at this. I thought about it. I was like, well, the ones who've been the hardest hit would probably grow the least because they had the most to overcome. That had nothing to do with it. And what I found was the ones that were willing, like to put their heads down and like not pick it up until they were out the other side, those were the ones who blew the doors off of the ones who were actually the 3 groups who didn't heal. So seeing that, I remember thinking, okay, I don't know how I'm going to heal from this, what it looks like, but that's just what I'm going to do. And there's just no stopping. And I made this vow to myself and I said, if I heal from this, I'm taking everybody with me. It just was kind of a knowing. And the road was really rocky. But as the research was proving what works, I was just trying it and it did. And then, with those discoveries, it was clear, like there was the research. And I was like, okay, so you mean to tell me if I do this, I'm actually going to feel better. I'm actually, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. And it worked. So I was just implementing what the research proved was working, what my study participants said worked. I didn't do what didn't work, and sort of created this little combination here that was really, it was just working.
Huh. So I'm curious now and I've heard, before, the obstacle is the way. If you can use that obstacle to get to that next level, or, get to where you're going. So with that, you've had these obstacles, these traumas, these, betrayals, all this. So what did you find? And I know, you did a whole PhD on this, so we're going to try to cram it in, but what were those things that helped you transform and get to this greatest gift?
Yeah. Well, the motivation behind it was I didn't have the luxury of just drowning in it. I just couldn't. I mean, I had kids to raise, I had a business to run, I had dogs to take care of, so that was one thing. And it got me out of bed every morning, and then it was, it really was in these discoveries, and I'm happy to share them if that would.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So the first one was, and this made so much sense. They all made sense. And when I show them, you'll see why. The first one was, originally I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And for those who aren't familiar, post-traumatic growth is, if you can imagine, kind of an upside of trauma, how any trauma, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, whatever, leaves you with a new awareness, insight, perspective you didn't have. But I had been through death of a loved one, and I'd actually been through disease. And I was like, no, this feels different. But I didn't want to assume that it was the same for everybody. So I asked all of my study participants, I said, if you had other traumas besides betrayal, is it different for you? Hands down, unanimously, they said it's so different. And here's why.
Okay.
Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the whole self is shattered and has to be rebuilt. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust, right? Those are huge.
Yeah.
And so it didn't quite qualify as post-traumatic growth. It was like, yeah, you need to rebuild your life, but you also need to rebuild yourself. So I coined a new term, post-betrayal transformation. That's the complete and total rebuild of yourself and your life after an experience with betrayal. So right off the bat, I saw it's a different experience coming out of a betrayal and fully healing. The second discovery, this was interesting because I realized so many people do not heal. And we found there's actually this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's known as post-betrayal syndrome. And we've had easily 45,000 people or so take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. A few things about that quiz. The first thing is we've all been taught time heals all wounds. I have the proof. When it comes to betrayal, that's not true.
Interesting.
Yeah, because there's a question that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm unwilling to trust. My betrayal happened 40 years ago. I can still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 10 years ago. Feels like it happened yesterday. So we know when it comes to betrayal, time may soften it a bit. It does not heal it.
Why do you think that is?
I know that is because we see an unhealed betrayal show up in health, in work, in relationships. So I know, we know, and I'm happy to share what that looks like.
Yeah.
And there are these, what a lot of people do is they think, oh, let me just go to therapy or something. Right. And that's on one level. And here's the thing too, if that therapist isn't highly skilled in betrayal, it does more harm than good. We have a lot of people coming into the EBT Institute with therapy trauma.
Wow.
It takes a very certain protocol, but that's hitting it on one level. Betrayal hits us on every level. And so if we don't address it physically, mentally, and emotionally, we're partially healing at best. So, you have an unhealed betrayal. I mean, we see it, like I said, in health and work and relationships. Like in relationships, I'll see it in one of two ways. The first way is in a repeat betrayal. That's how you know it's unhealed. The faces change, but it's the same thing. People say, really? Heck, I keep going from partner to partner to partner, boss to boss to boss, friend to friend to friend. Is it me? Yes, it is. Not in that it's your fault.
Right.
It's your opportunity. There's a profound lesson waiting to be learned. You are lovable, worthy, and deserving. You need better boundaries in place, whatever it is for you. Until and unless you get that, you will keep having opportunities in the form of people to teach you.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I guess that makes sense because if we continue to be the same person, the same kind of like you said, boundaries, same actions, same, character, everything the same,
Yeah.
the results won't change. It just, like you said, the face looks different.
That's it. And so,
Huh.
and even in my experience, think about it. Here it was the most important people in my life, the biggest people that I gave my trust to, all betrayed me. But it was in that huge decision for me, which was, that's it. I'm going back for this PhD. And it was so out of my normal thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so big for me, but it was one of the first things I've ever done just for myself without like, does that work for everybody? Is that okay?
Right.
But because of it, my entire life changed.
Huh.
So it's when you get that lesson, it's huge. The second way we see it in relationships is, the big wall goes up. We're like, nope, been there, done that. No one's getting near me again. We think it's coming from a place of strength. It's not. It's coming from fear.
See it fear. It's, fear just trickles into everything,
everything.
And like you said, that it's not safety with that wall going up. It's that fear. And I think fear does so much. I mean, in health now, in post betrayal transformation and everything. It's interesting how that kind of ekes into all negativity. Fear is kind of always the root. I feel like.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why people don't heal, for sure.
Yeah.
We see it in health. We see it in work too. And like I said, mentioning the people who didn't heal, there were 3 groups who did not heal. The first group, this was the group, they were numbing, avoiding, distracting. Like they were in so much pain. They ran to the doctor who put them on a mood stabilizer or anti-anxiety medication, or they started drinking or emotionally eating. And it may have made the day a bit easier to get through, not without a price. They didn't heal. The second group, this was the group, they just refused to accept their betrayal. Like they had their story, they were sticking with it. That was it. They didn't heal. And the third group, I found this really interesting. This was the group, speaking of fear, this was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of fear of breaking up a family, financial fear, religious reasons, that was a big one. They just did whatever they could to turn the other cheek, try to get over it, whatever. I saw 2 things with this group: a further deterioration of the relationship. And this group by far was the most physically sick. Yeah, you're broken up, can't handle that. But people are so afraid of that complete and utter death and destruction of the old. Yeah. But that's the only way to birth the new. Whether and rebuilding is always a choice. Whether you rebuild yourself and move on. That's what I did with my family. It just wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something entirely new. Like I'm talking from the ground up new. With the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. I mean, it's 2 totally transformed people. Not long ago, we married each other again.
Wow.
New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids is our bridal party. But first of all, there's no way in a bazillion years I ever would have done that if I wasn't totally different. And for sure, if he wasn't either.
Yeah.
But you never know that until there's that complete and total crash and burn.
Wow. Yeah. It's it's kind of like you get the vision of like the phoenix, rising from the ashes, something completely new and beautiful. And how 2 different stories, I mean, with your family and then with your husband, how that's completely different, and how you have to navigate when can you rebuild and when you just have to kind of walk away.
Yeah. And we teach that.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say, how do people know the difference or know which way to go with it?
Yeah. When and we teach this whole process on how do you know if it's safe and if it's in your best interest to just rebuild yourself and move on, or rebuild with someone else. We actually teach, it's called the window of willingness. And we see like to what extent someone is willing, and then it's completely up to us. Because even if they're totally willing, we could just have zero interest in it at all. But we teach when to know if it makes at least the least bit of sense or not at all. It's crystal clear. Okay. But the other, I'd love to share the third discovery, because this was the one where this blew my mind. I mean, and in like the geekiest way, I thought my head was going to fly right off my body when this happened. And what we learned was, while people can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome. And if we have time, I'm happy to share some of the symptoms. 2, this healthy, whole, healed, complete a completely different state of post-betrayal transformation, we're going to go through 5 now proven predictable stages.
Huh.
What's even better and more exciting about that is we even know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every one of those stages. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. So healing is entirely predictable.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
That's really cool that there is a process and just something kind of like the framework to get through that.
There's a roadmap. Yeah, I'm happy to share the 5 stages if that would help.
Yeah, I would love to dive into those real quick and hear about those 5 stages. Absolutely.
Sure. So it's what we teach within the PBT Institute. It's what our certified coaches and practitioners teach. It's totally mapped out in
Awesome.
Trust Again. The 5 stages are in here.
Perfect.
And I'm just going to give you a distilled version. So
Awesome.
stage 1 is before it happens. So if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with everybody was a real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, which is thinking and doing, right? And not really prioritizing the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. Real easy if a table only has 2 legs to topple over.
Yeah.
Real easy for us if we're only focusing on those 2 legs. Stage 2, by far the scariest of all of the stages. And this is shock, trauma, D-Day, Discovery Day. And it's the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. Right here, you've ignited the stress response. You're headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete and total state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around what you just learned. This makes no sense. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, like the rules that prevent chaos that govern you. Don't go there. This is how life works. Trust this person, And in a moment, every rule you've known is no longer. The bottom's bottomed out and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. So it's terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of whatever you could to stay alive, right?
Right.
That's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Who can I trust? Where do I go? How do I feed my kids? Right? But here's the trap. Once you've figured out how to survive, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where you just came from, you think it's good. And because we have no idea there's a stage 4 and stage 5, transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we start planting roots here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. So we start planting roots here and 4 things happen. The first is we get like those small self benefits. You get to be right. You get your story. You get someone to blame. You get sympathy from everybody you tell your story to. You get so many things, right?
Yeah.
And so you plant deeper roots here. And then the next thing happens. Now your mind, because you're here longer than you're supposed to be, your mind starts doing things like, maybe you're not all that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So now this is what you're thinking, and you're planting deeper roots right in this space. Now, because this is what you're thinking, like energy attracts like energy. So now you're calling people and circumstances and relationships towards you to confirm, yep, this is exactly where you belong. Gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but you don't know there's anywhere else to go.
Right.
Right? You think this is it and it stinks. So right here, you resign yourself. You're like, I don't know how to deal with this, but this is life now. So right here is where you start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keep you busy, anything to numb, avoid, distract yourself from what's painful to feel or face. So think about it. You do it for a day, a week, a
Yeah.
month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see someone 20 years out, right? You can see this. I can see someone 20 years out and say, that emotional eating you're doing, or that drinking you're doing, that numbing in front of the TV you're doing, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me like I'm crazy, right? They'd be like,
Right.
that happened 20 years ago. What are you talking about?
Yep.
All they did was put themselves and lock themselves into stage 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Just kind of numbing and band-aiding the
That's
issues.
it. That's
Yep.
all they're doing. And that's why this book, From Hardened to Healed, it's just for stage 3.
Wow.
Because I found the 5 stages are obvious. Now there's a roadmap, but everybody was landing in stage 3 and staying there. And I'm like, stage 3ers, I'm coming for you. They need their own book. So
Right.
Anyway,
Man.
if you are willingness is a big word here because many people are not willing to let go of the story, the small self benefits, everything you get with the grief, mourn the loss, a bunch of things you need to do. You move to stage 4. Okay. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo my experience, but I control what I do with it. And when you've made that decision, you start to turn down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stop the massive damage you've been doing in stages 2 and stage 3. Okay. What's interesting about stage 4 is I always use this example of if you were to move to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff isn't all there. It's like, and you don't, but as you're moving in, you don't necessarily take everything with you, And what I found was, if your friends weren't there for you, right here, you've outgrown them. You don't take them with you from stage 3 to stage 4. And this happens all the time. People say, what the heck? I've had these friends 10, 20, 30 years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't rise, they don't come.
Exactly.
Very common. And so as you're making stage 4 mentally, in this new space, you start to move into the 5th most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. Awesome. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercising. You didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. You were surviving. Now you do.
Right.
Your mind starts to heal. You're making new rules. You're making new boundaries just based on your experience. And you have a new worldview based on the road you just traveled. And the 4 legs of the table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
Wow. And I can see why so many people get stuck in that survival once they get through the first 2 stages and can't even get to the adjustment and then healing. And so what you've done here is breaking it down and through your books and everything. Wow. So it's just cool because there's so many people probably have this trauma that they don't even realize. And so what are some of the symptoms maybe people might not realize that they're experiencing because of betrayal that they can be aware of now?
Yeah. So, every few months I pull the stats from the Post Betrayal Syndrome quiz. And so now we have men, women, just about every country is represented, figure 45,000 people. These are the stats. Ready? 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. 94% deal with painful triggers. These are the most common physical symptoms. Ready? Yeah. 71% have low energy. 68% have sleep issues. 63% have extreme fatigue. That's how you know your adrenals have tanked. Yeah. 47% have weight changes. In the beginning, maybe you can't hold food down. Later on, you're using food for comfort. 45% have a gut issue. And that's anything from Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea. It doesn't matter. You name it. The gut is definitely acting up. Mentally, the most common mental symptoms, 78% are overwhelmed. 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief. 68% are unable to focus. 64% are in shock, and 62% are unable to concentrate.
Wow.
So imagine you can't concentrate. You have a gut issue. You're exhausted, and you're supposed to work.
Yeah.
Right? That's not even the emotional ones. Ready? Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are very angry. And it is really common to go back and forth between the two. 82% feel hurt. 80% have anxiety. 79% are stressed. A few more. Here's why I wrote the book, Trust Again. Ready? 84% have an inability to trust. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. And 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
Oh, wow. So there's a lot to choose from there. And so, yeah, I think just being able to get on this path of healing, this transformation that you've set up for people is just phenomenal. And so uh, it's, you've given so much good valuable insight within this post-betrayal transformation process. So I thank you for that. The kind of last thing, and I'd love to hear from your perspective before we kind of wrap things up, is so the fifth trait of pencil leadership is that everyone's created to leave their positive mark on the world in some way.
Mhm.
And I kind of know what yours is, but I'd love to hear kind of just from your words, when everything is said and done for you here on earth, what do you hope your positive mark is?
Yeah, as AA is to alcohol, the PBT Institute is for betrayal.
It's awesome. Yeah. And you're doing it, which is amazing to see and just be connected now with you and be able to continue to watch you make such a big impact. And hopefully people listening can realize maybe they're dealing with some of this and can come, seek help and seek healing through your program. And so we can just be, a little pebble in the jar of people healing through this episode. And so I appreciate you, Debi, being on Pencil Leadership today. As we wrap up, where can people go to find out about what you do and connect with you?
Yeah, the best thing for them to do is to take the healed or hardened quiz so they see exactly what stage they're in, and they can just find that at healedorhardenedquiz.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, guys, definitely go take that quiz, just figure things out and get connected with Debi, and just so you can get through this program if you need it. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, share this with somebody, share this out to your communities. You never know who might be struggling with these betrayal traumas. And so we can make a difference together by sharing this out into our communities. So again, we can all make a difference together in such a simple act. So again, Dr. Silber, thank you so much for being on Pencil Leadership today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And thanks so much for tuning into this episode today. If you found value at all from this episode, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It just helps us get this show, these messages out in front of more people. And don't forget to share this with someone who you think could benefit from listening to as well. Now let's go out and be pencil leaders.